Hi, welcome to Punchline Talks, the business breakfast briefers. I'm Mark Owen, and each week I invite a panel of business experts to review the morning newspapers, find out what's happening in their own individual business and their own individual business sector, and finally, what's caught their eye in this week's Punchline. But before I start, I just want to thank our fantastic sponsors, Hazelwood's Accountants and Business Advisors. And we really couldn't do the show without them. And we got Glen here today as well from them. Okay, well, let me introduce you to the panel. We've got Jon McGinty, he's the CEO of Gloucester City Council, responsible for a budget of around £15 million, 250 staff. It's a massive job, and he oversees the council planning, developments, environmental waste, recycling, parking, leisure, culture, and much more. And of course, he's the man who's driving the £107 million digital forum development forward, as well as looking after the city's property portfolio. That's King Square, Eastgate Shopping Centre and St.Oswalds. It's a big estate. Plus, what is happening in GL1 and Oxstalls Sports Campus? So there's lots to talk with you today, Jon. So looking forward to finding out all about that. Also, Greyfriars, what's happening there too? Okay, we've got Simon Daws. He's the godfather of the Gloucester Old Spot restaurant on Tewkesbury Road, nestled between Cheltenham and Tewkesbury. Him and his wife, Kate, have hosted guests there since 2010, focusing on great food, real ale. The pub is featured in numerous guides, including the Good Pub Guide and the Michelin Guide to Pubs. It's regarded as one of the best places to eat in Cheltenham, and I can vouch for that. It really is fantastic. So we'll find out more about him and also about the pub, and also what's happening in the hospitality trade. It is definitely difficult. Then finally, and not last, we have one of our regulars back on the show. It's Glen, Director of Hazelwood, specialising in tax. The company has more than 500 staff split between two offices at Cheltenham, Staverton, approximately turnover of 40 million. But the company has recently opened an office in Bristol, and yesterday it was announced they opened an office in Cardiff. So we'll find out all about that. Plus, I'd like to ask Glen, what's Glen's wish list for the budget? So we'll find out all about that too. Okay, before we start, we'll just have a quick look at the newspapers. Okay, making the headlines, The Guardian. No justice for Glenville tragedy until next decade, says The Guardian. The Times, firm behind Glenville refit blocked from closing down. The Metro, Kyle, don't blame me, I'm just the host. I say the same thing, by the way. The Eye, Brexit food rules set for delay to avoid price rises at supermarkets. The Daily Mail, Rwanda's back, but it's Germany planning to use it. The Daily Telegraph, prisoners could serve their time in Estonia, says the Daily Telegraph. The Daily Express, we're not greedy. Britain's elderly will do a deal on fuel support. Do they really have a sale in it? I don't know. The Daily Mirror, a monument for Queen Elizabeth. And then the Financial Times, Macron names Barnier as premier in bid to break deadlock in France. And the Daily Star, Mad Vlad has spy whale whacked. And have you noticed there's actually no there's no sun today? Don't know why, but who knows? Maybe it's a conspiracy. Okay, let's talk to you, Jon. What have you picked out from the papers today, please?
Well, it's really interesting coming on this show, Mark, and sort of getting to read the papers, which I don't always get to do on a morning. So I could have picked hundreds of stories, but there's a few that caught my eye. First of all, in the Eye, talking about Grenfell. I think we have to talk about Grenfell this week because it's a really shocking reading and hearing about what the causes of the tragedy, but the bit that caught my eye is this argument about regulation. It's brought back. We spend years in this country bemoaning regulation and saying, "Oh, regulation's bad and red tape stops business" and all of this stuff. And then occasionally you have a tragedy, a catastrophe like this, which actually brings it all back to home, and you realise that actually some regulation is good. Now, what happened in previous decades in terms of this cull of red tape, I think was appalling. We got to a system where basically it was the contractors determining how their products were going to be tested, and that is just an appalling state of affairs. And so, often when I come on this show, I'm here from the public sector. These other guys are here from the private sector, And, you know, the public sector doesn't have a good reputation for its role in sort of regulating and making sure things are safe. But Grenfell is a lesson for us all that actually some regulation is very important and is very good. And I just wanted to sort of make that point that, you know, we need to stop this sort of, I mean, what the eye is talking about is about, you know, nearly all of the Conservative candidates in the upcoming leadership election are still calling for deregulation and cutting of more red tape and decrying regulation as holding back businesses. We've got to get away from this simplistic view about what regulation is. On the facing page, on page 7 of the eye, is a story about High Speed 2. Now, whenever I read about High Speed 2, I just get so angry, Mark. It's just such a monumental waste of public money. It's now up to 67 billion. It's not going to, I mean, it's not going to achieve any of the benefits, by the sounds of it, that it was designed to. And when you read these stories, it's just getting worse and worse. So they're now going to build a station where they're only going to use 3 of the platforms at Birmingham. Of all the platforms that are going to be built, only 3 of them are going to be used. But it's more expensive to do that than to redesign the station. They've now discovered that the trains that we're contracted to build for High Speed 2 are so bespoke that they're going to be massively over budget, and no one's going to want to build them because the demand is going to be so small. And of course the thing's not even going to go into the centre of London. They've purchased the boring machine, but they haven't yet a decision about whether or not they're going to do it from Old Oak Common into Euston. So when you think about all of the public money, all that transport money that could have been spent around the rest of the country, it just is the worst white elephant, the worst public sector, you know, capital project I can think of in living memory, and we'll be regretting it for decades to come.
It's just complete balls up, let's be honest about it. It really is. And I'm like, I'm sure the rest of the panel as well. You just want to hold your head in shame and knock your head against the wall, isn't it, really, when there's such a need out there for all this public money.
I know. I mean, 67 billion would have gone a long way in, you know, if you think about what we could have done, you know, in Gloucestershire, things like connecting us better to Oxford, the Oxford-Cambridge arc or something like that, or, you know, or improving the frequency of the services between Bristol and Birmingham. There's, you know, I mean, there's projects trying to get things up and running. They haven't even got it. They're also saying that this is going to damage the capacity on the existing West Coast main line, because there's going to be more trains trying to use the same track, and there's going to be disruption to the people that are currently commuting on the West Coast main line. And it's just, I just get so angry when I read about this project. You know, when they did it in France, they basically spent a huge amount of time planning and in the planning and design phase, so that when they awarded the contracts, they were all fixed price contracts. In the UK, we've spent hardly any time on the planning and design phase, so we've just awarded cost plus contracts, and then the costs have more than doubled as a result, of course. It's just awful.
Bonkers. So should they have carried it through then? Should they have gone on to the rest of the original plan
No.
and spent more billions?
I think they should stop it now. I think they should stop it now. When I drive through parts of Buckinghamshire and I see what they've done to the countryside there, I just weep.
No, it's complete balls. Okay, thanks ever so much for that, John. Okay, Glenn, let's go over to you. What have you picked out from the papers?
So I've actually gone electronic today. So what's really good about you, John was saying then, there's so many great stories. I mean, one of the stories I came across, which I didn't mention, was just great that you do actually look at these things you don't normally look at, which was the 10 best bars in Bilbao. I'm only mentioning that because I'm going there in October. I'd have never found that article if you hadn't made me look at the papers this morning. So that was really good. But the serious ones I've got, or semi-serious, are the Battle for Britain's Brew, which is a undertaken in The Guardian, which is where can you get your best tea bag, which I'll come back to very briefly in a moment. I've also got this is in the Sunday Times, although it's only posted yesterday. Private equity drives growth, don't stifle it with taxes, which links up to what we're going to be talking about a little bit later, I think, and then something which is quite relevant to me because it's to do with office working, and it's PwC are going to start monitoring their employees going back
We just froze you.
to the office, making sure they don't. Basic stories. Just picking up the first one on the tea bag. Your best tea bag is Asda, just to cut that out straight away. It's the cheapest and the best. And they slated Twinings quite significantly. They 4 times as much, and it came last. Nipping across to private equity. So what a private equity structure is, we come across it a lot. What that situation is where you'll have a bunch of investors, which could be insurers and very wealthy individuals. They'll pile money into an investment, and that private equity will be then used to fuel acquisitions within the market. We see it a lot in Hazelwoods. Our specialisms have come across it a lot. So what might happen is there might be a run on dental practices, and dental practices will be getting acquired all over the place and it'll be put into an investment platform. Well, what this article in the Sunday Times is saying is that the reason people get into those investments is because they pay relatively low taxes on it, capital gains tax, and also you get a lot of foreign money comes in that way, and that ultimately does benefit our economy by bringing these businesses all into one platform. And this particular article is saying, well, that's going to fall over if capital gains tax gets massively increased. And further, that one of the budget points is that let's call it an attack on non-domiciles, possibly not encouraging them to stay in the country. Well, they won't be interested in putting their money in. So that article is all about investment in the UK and how it could have a problem if we saw quite a harsh budget for investment. And then my other story, as I said, which is PwC. So this is one of the biggest accountancy firms in the world. They employ tens and tens of thousands of people in the UK, like all office businesses. There's a working from home policy, and also like a lot of businesses, they're now saying, well, we'd actually quite like to see people back in the office nowadays, and people are so accustomed to working from home that this kind of become part of our work ethic. And PwC are saying you've got to be in the office for 3 days a week. Unlike, say, Hazelwoods, where we would say that PwC are actually going to exercise their muscle and actually track it using various cards and things like that to ensure that people actually are in the office. And they're even going to publicly, they're even going to report within the firm so that they'll look at the statistics of everybody and see how much they're working in the office. So people can go in and say, oh, look at that, John didn't come in, he only came in for 2 days a week. So hence they could get themselves into a bit of trouble. London has been the slowest. The big players like PwC and some of the other big boys have been doing it as well. I'd imagine them coming back into the office in some ways is quite helpful, isn't it? Because we've actually got workers back into the town centres and city centres again, back buying their coffees and their croissants. So, it's not such a bad thing really, as some of those coffee shops might actually start to survive again.
Well, thanks ever so much for that, Glenn. Really good. You sort of slightly froze up there, so sorry about that. Simon, we're going to go over to you. Great to have you on the show. What have you picked out for us, please?
I've gone with the Western Daily Press today. A national story, maybe international evening in the Western Daily Press business. Guy Taylor writes about EV registrations being in growth, and they were up 10.8% in August. Typically a lower month for car sales, with people being away and the new registrations, but they were 22.6% of sales of cars in the UK in August. And for me, that's a very good sign. We're a two EV car family, and we enjoy and get a lot of pleasure out of harvesting energy overnight into a battery and driving around in cars in an effective way, and running our house in a cost-effective way. There is obviously the deniers of this story. My advice would be, don't knock it till you try it. And we are a long way behind Europe. on the basis probably of one of the arguments is the infrastructure for charging across the nation. Private equity isn't going to come into that in a big way until car sales increase. So there's chicken and egg, which will gradually evolve, I'm sure. So benefit in kind has helped people with affordability of buying these cars, and manufacturers have been heavily discounting to make them more attractive. In terms of a PCP, you can get yourself electric now for just over £200 a month. It's a very cost-effective way without paying for the fuel on shorter journeys. So I think it will grow. Hydrogen doesn't seem to be talked about quite so much anymore. Maybe from a fiscal point of view for the government is in the generation that's coming is where are they going to harvest money from the loss of duty on fossil fuels. So that may be an unwelcome scenario. There's been talk about charging electric vehicles per mile. We'll have to watch and see where that goes. But if you do go to Europe, typically taxis, buses, and trains in city centres and big urban centres are mostly electric now. We're way behind on that. And Gloucester City Centre will be having these conversations, I'm sure. But a good way to lose pollution in areas that are challenged by it is something they need to address. Second story, Tim Hayward, Financial Times. One for me, in a way, the charming ineptitude of British hospitality. Tim writes, as service levels have gone down, as prices have gone up, and what's slowly dawning on us all is this situation is unlikely to reverse in our lifetimes. Many of us will be back from holidays, and he adds, it's common for British diners to come home from holidays from big cities of France, Spain, Italy, or Greece, where they've been served by mature men and women, taking no nonsense from customers, but operating with blistering efficiency. Well, that is certainly true. I'm just back from the Paralympics, having had a great 5 days in Paris, and it was a pleasure to be served by business professionals. Hospitality in Britain obviously takes its employment very seriously and training young people. I myself started in the industry age 14. So bringing young people into the industry is an inevitability. It's how they are dovetailed into a more experienced team, and UK hospitality in particular does so much in terms of training and certification. But big business, as we're seeing in many areas of society, are moving towards convenience for us or profiteering for them. And I know, say, the fast food end, typically if you go to purchase goods, you'll be doing it on your screen, your app, or on their digital face as you walk into the business. The evolution of our industry, which we cannot deny, is very important to evolve our offer, and the desire of young people to go to bars and brewery taps, be served by pop-ups. Typically, you're getting your food where you queue, you order yourself. There's very little service. You are doing all that, and you walk away with a cardboard tray. For my part, and hospitality has gone on about this for a very long time, we need better recognition for people in hospitality to be a really great career. I've had a great career, and many of my contemporaries have a fantastic career out of hospitality. It's a very, very good way to get into a business at low cost, to build that business with a management or lease model, and buying your own freehold eventually. So customers do have a role of respect for professional employees. We have to promote professional service standards, and the more we all visit Europe and get served that way, the better. But there are thousands and thousands of places with superb hospitality, but our industry is diverse, and some of what Tim writes in the Financial Times is issues that we will address.
Okay, thanks ever so much for that, Simon. I think it all depends what people want to pay for, isn't it? At the end of the day, you want good service, good food, good quality of everything. You got to pay for it. And the trouble is sometimes people don't want to pay for anything. I'm going to come back to you, Simon. We're going to go back over to Jon, because I've got a lot to talk about in 3 minutes, really, about the council and what's going on with the councils, Jon. Let's touch on GL1 and obviously we all know about Aspire and what happened there, but GL1 and Oxstalls, what's happening there at the moment, please?
Well, we're about not too far away, just in the next few weeks, literally, to make a decision on a new operator for all of our leisure facilities. We actually started that procurement a couple of years ago, and then we were getting to the point of a decision when Aspire went under, and we had to do that emergency standing up an interim provider with Freedom Leisure, who've done fantastically in the time they've been with us. Once we got them in place, we then restarted the procurement process. So we're now at the end of that. We got tenders back, I think, a week and a half ago, and we've been evaluating them as quick as we can, because the current contract with Freedom runs out on the 1st of January. So we need a new operator in there from the 2nd of January next year. So we're looking to announce a new operator later this month, and they'll spend 3 months mobilising and getting in from January.
Okay, no, that sounds very, very promising. What about Greyfriars? Because obviously on the back of Eastgate Shopping Centre, the levelling up fund from the previous government was around 11 million quid. Is that still going to go ahead, or is that sort of pending, depending on the budget?
We're really in the government's hands on that. We keep chasing officials for news about whether or not we can press go on that project. We know what we want to do. But they keep telling us that all spending decisions are being reviewed, and we'll find out in the next couple of months, was the news this week. So I'm expecting there'll be an announcement around the budget statement, I guess.
Okay, and the other big thing is the forum. How's that getting on?
Forum is very exciting. We're sort of hitting the practical completion stage now for the office space, first of the office spaces, and we're hoping very soon to make an announcement about a big new tenant in there, which is very exciting. I can't talk to you about today, but we're hoping to make an announcement on that soon, and hopefully that will attract others in there. And then, you know, the hotel, Simon talking about the hospitality industry. Hotel we hope will open in spring next year, or finish, be ready to open then. So yeah, all very exciting on the forum, and just looking forward to seeing it open. If you go past it now, you'll see some of the hoardings have gone down, so you can see the frontage of the hotel, and you can see through the development site much more clearly now. So it's great to go and see how it's changed.
It's looking absolutely fantastic. And I've got to talk to you about very, very quickly. Obviously, Tewkesbury Borough Council, it was announced yesterday that it had a massive cyber attack there. They seem to have locked down. You've been through it yourself over, we think we're still maybe £1 million it cost to fix Gloucester's cyber attack. What was the number one advice you'd give to the chief executive of Tewkesbury?
Yeah, well, he was on the phone on Wednesday when they discovered it happened. My heart just goes out to him and his colleagues, because it's a horrible thing to go through. We've obviously reached out and offered whatever support we can over the last 36 hours. My hope is that it's not as serious as the one that affected Gloucester, and they'll be able to get back up and running as quickly as possible. They put in place a few sort of short-term contingency plans to serve customers. But my number one piece of advice is it's a marathon, not a sprint. Don't try and rush it. It will take time. Pace yourself, give yourself breaks, work in shifts, all of that stuff, because it's very easy to try and just run at these emergencies when they happen, and you just end up falling over and collapsing in a heap. So pace yourself and be prepared for the rocky road.
Okay, thanks ever so much for that, John. We're the same, by the way. We offered the same assistance to Tewkesbury Council. Any communications that we can get out for them, we definitely will try our best as well. Thanks for that, Glen. We're going to go back over to you. Hey, great news for Hazelwoods, isn't it? They're opening offices all over the place. Goodness gracious. Bristol one moment, Cardiff the next. What's going on, Boyle?
Yeah, I suppose that's a bit like I was talking about earlier on with a return to the office, isn't it? Goes to show that we do need people in an actual in a team together, face to face, talking to one another. So rather than maybe stifle growth in office space, we're actually keeping going. So we've got, as you said, we've had an office in Bristol for a while now, and we've just opened an office in Cardiff. So from tiny acorns, mighty oaks hopefully will grow. So it's a small managed office over in Cardiff, 15 desks there. And the idea there is what we're trying do is grow our corporate tax offering in South Wales. And so we'll have a team recruiting locally, as well as we've got some, we've had, let's just call them some Welsh people in Hazelwoods for a while. So it's convenient for them anyway to be based closer to home. And so, yeah, and so it's to tap into for us, a relatively new market, being Cardiff, Newport, and, in the surrounding area for corporate work, so business to business type work rather than to individuals. So that's what we're hoping to expand there. So I'm sure you'll see some more marketing and that kind of thing in the near future. You also asked me a little, said, what are my hopes and dreams for the budget? So there's a lot of predictions, and I think Labour have been brilliant at not really leaking what they're going to do at all. They've made some very public statements, but not have been a bit light on the detail. So if I was going to hope for anything, I would say it seems like they're going to maybe increase capital gains tax. Please do not take that as read, because this is just all rumour and happenstance. I think I would like to see, if capital gain tax rates are going to go up, I think I'd like to see the annual exemption go up. That's the thing, that the threshold below which you don't pay capital gains tax. At the moment, that's only £3,000, and so actually, you don't have to be a huge serial investor to get caught into paying tax on those sorts of things. I think I'd like to see that. I'd like to see business asset disposal relief remain. That's the relief that means that if you sell something in your whole lifetime for less than £1 million, you only pay 10% tax, because that really does help your smaller businesses, succession and all those kinds of things. I think I'd like to see that remain, and some serious clarity over what's going to happen with residency and non-domicile. So I do a lot of work in that space. So I advise a lot of people who are coming to and from the UK, and I talk about domicile, which is the key to whether you pay things like inheritance tax or not. And so again, that's supposed to be being completely rewritten. So I'd like to see that to be nice and clear. I'd like that to be understandable for everybody who's in that area, and so that we're able to provide sort of good advice for them. There's a bit of a huge tax tail on it, but that's why I'd like to see some changes.
Okay, thanks ever so much for that, Glenn. It's coming up very soon. I always look forward to the budget. Can't wait.
Yeah.
So you and I will be talking a lot through that, and obviously you'll be coming back on the show as well for our budget special. Okay, Simon, let's go over to you. Look, I'm very excited to hear all about the Gloucester spot. You've been there a long, long time now. It's a well-established business. I'm going to bring up on my screen also, if I can. I'm going to share it here, not that one, but this here. There you go. Simon, can you see that?
Yeah, she's an old bus, a grand old lady.
So tell us about the business, really. So, how many covers do you have? How many people do you see in a week?
In a week, typically 2,000. Garden seats over 220, and during the COVID lockdown, we worked tirelessly to create an outdoor space that would people, when the sun comes out, they just migrate immediately to who's got the best outdoors, and we were ready for that. And luckily enough, we've had reasonably good summers. Last year, not so great. Inside, we've got this typical baronial, maybe dining hall. It's quite unique, part of our USP, and that seats 60 people. So that's a great place when it's full, a nice atmosphere, great place for Sunday lunch or for an evening meal. And the bar is more casual dining, big bar. And we obviously focus on traditional values and hospitality, where we're remembering people's names, great real ale, local cider. Johnny, my son, works there and is really up to his game with fine wines. Have done a great job on that, and all the food is handmade. But really, our mantra is give people what they want, and we're focused on customers' needs. You can't be all things to all men, but generally, we're a positive professional business trying to have yes attitudes to we'd like to help you and send you away happy and glad you came. The industry in general, because you wanted me to say a few things about our industry. Labour have floated this idea of a 4-day week. And whilst business to business people who sell time rather than products, they probably like a 5-day week, 8 hours a day. But actually for hospitality, we already operate a model like that for our chefs who work 4 days and have 3 days off. They work longer days, lunch and dinner. It suits them and it suits their lifestyle. But a 4-day week would open up a 4-day weekend, because some people would take Friday off, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, and others would take Monday off. Saturday, Sunday, Monday. Now, there's a very big opportunity there that from Thursday evening becomes the new Friday to Monday afternoon, which becomes the new Sunday. So leisure time is what drives the hospitality industry and the leisure industry in the UK. That could be a good move. It will divide opinions.
No, absolutely fascinating. And what about the minimum wage? Because I always worry about the minimum wage. I met Rachel Reeves and interviewed her, and I'm sure that Labour have got plans to increase the minimum wage, especially for 18-year-olds. We've been banging the drum about it for a while. What's your feeling on that?
Well, bringing that cohort into the national minimum wage net that collects most people now is a big issue, because a lot of people in hospitality are 18 to 21. And as I referred earlier about the skill set, clearly we employ 16-year-olds, and hospitality is probably the number one place where your kids, my kids, and most people's children go and move from a childhood, adolescent life into the adult world. We're a brilliant industry for creating that journey for young people before they go to university or onwards in their lives. So that's to be celebrated. Clearly, affordability when you buy a plate of food or drink in a pub is an issue. We all see that. But our margin has been undermined so much by the cost of labour that what you now see on a plate as a pizza for £12 isn't the ingredients plus VAT. So much more of the makeup of that profit margin now needs to take the labour cost. And it breaks my heart that eating out costs a lot more. Perhaps the wage inflation needs to be tracked against that, and the national minimum wage does put more money in the working man and working woman's pocket, more disposable income. So there is a residual benefit in the long term. I hope that more people have more leisure spend.
Yeah, my big worry is that you could price out young people. That's the thing. When they're still learning their trade and learning those soft skills that are so important for the development, especially sort of 16 to 18-year-olds. That's my worry.
But if you go to many hospitality venues, Mark, young people are eating out like crazy. My parents went out for a meal twice a year. I probably went for a curry once a week after a game of rugby, and the pub a couple of times a week. Nowadays, our children eat breakfast on the move, lunch on the move, or supper, or stop for coffee everywhere. This is all hospitality spend. And typically they're eating on the move from a kiosk or a restaurant or a bar once, sometimes twice a day. That's great news for hospitality. The market is much bigger.
Okay, no, fascinating. Thanks ever so much for that, Simon. Okay, we're going to quickly wrap up. We've only got a couple of minutes left. So, guys, we're going to rattle through the papers. I'm going to start with you, Glenn. What have you picked out from Punchline? Sorry, the pick of the punchlines. Very quickly.
Yeah. So I of course picked your story for our great friend Mark Cummins, who we've got a lot of love for. I've never done that before. That's probably not worked. But I love to read about him. Great to see what he's up to since let's call it retiring. I'm really looking forward to getting hold of that book. And as I said, he better autograph it for me next time I see it.
Well, he just wants to take your money, mate. He just can't wait. Being a Yorkshireman. Thanks very much for that. John, what have you picked out for this week's pick of the punchlines?
Well, just sort of briefly combining the review of the papers. In the Times, there's a story about whether we should be investing in towns or cities. And obviously, I've got a lot of interest in the investment in Gloucester. But this article is basically talking about how important it is. And Britain cities buck the European trend in terms of their sort of agglomeration power and their productivity for various reasons, but largely to do with transport. But one of the reasons why Britain cities underperform is because they don't have enough city centre living. And we're compared to European cities. And what you've picked up in the Punchline was a report that's coming to Gloucester City Council's cabinet next week called your headline is derelict building set to tackle housing shortage. We don't have a huge amount of sort of building space in Gloucester, but we do have these little sites like Spread Eagle Court, like the Oxbow, the old Fortis Insurance building. And each of these is, 30, 40 homes potentially. And together we're trying to, our new Liberal Democrat-led administration is trying to really hit on that growth of city centre living, not just to tackle the housing issues, but to increase the spending in cities.
And also regenerate it and make it look better at the end of the day. If they can repurpose it, bring it back. There are so many, especially Spread Eagle Court, which is just by the Forum.
Yeah.
107 million quid you've spent on it, and you've got a big pile of pants sitting next to it. It's really important that it's done.
Exactly.
Thanks ever so much for that, John. We will follow that very, very closely as it progresses. Simon, what's your pick of the punchlines, please, sir?
Adding my big shout out to Mark Cummings, much loved friend, and he's actually going to relive the Cummings County quiz at Christmas at the Gloucester Old Spot. We're going to do a charity quiz and promote Spark books there for him. You'll all be very welcome. Punchline, Mid-Counties Co-op, sorry if that's glaring. You've reported that they've done a partnership with Olio, the Food Waste Heroes, and they're obviously our regional and local supermarket, do a great job. They've given away 5,000 unused meals to a good cause, and I champion that, along with myself trying to be a Gloucestershire food and drink champion. And you can go into your Mid-Counties Co-op, they'll do Mudwalls, fruit and veg, people like Godsall's, Gloucestershire cheese. I know Gloucester Brewery and Stroud Brewery get their drinks in there, and many more. So they are doing more for local produce, local province, food miles, and try and beat the scandal that is you cannot even buy an English apple in a supermarket. I'm sounding like Liz Truss.
Totally agree with this, Simon. Thanks ever so much. Unfortunately, that's all we got time for today. I'd just like to thank my wonderful guests. Thanks ever so much for coming. A big, massive thank you to Hazelwood's Accountants and Business Advisors. And finally, a big thank you all for watching. If you like the show, please like, share, and subscribe. And we'll be back again next week. But in between all that lovely time, just remember, it's all in the punchline. Thanks ever so much. Bye, everybody.